Good morning and welcome to some new Houdini tutorial here on VFX Evolution. As you might know, Houdini shipped with a new release 18.5, which has some very intensive and awesome new PyroFX tools for real-time calculation and real-time changing of your explosions. So here in this little tutorial I will show you how you can set up this explosion and how you can change it with the new tools in Houdini. So first of all, create a geometry node and create a Pyroburst Source. The Pyroburst Source is pretty much a particle representation of your explosion here, and you can see how this is generated on the fly. You have the possibility here to change initial size, direction, spread angle, like if you want to make it wider or shorter. You can adjust the roundness, pretty much a lot of settings to make this initial burst of your explosion very interesting. You can change the start frame, so it's more and better, easier now to make the start of your explosion, the duration, and the burst components, like which attributes are transferred to the PyroSolver. In our case it's burn. And as you can see, we have our old friend here, volume rasterize, which is creating the volume on the fly, which then goes into the new PyroSolver. And you can see my graphics card is exceeding at the memory limit. I have a RTX 2070, just for the hardware nerds out there that want to compare every setting to their own. So in the PyroSolver I changed the voxel size now to 0.4, and you can see we have a very crappy explosion here, very low res, but it's simulating pretty fast on the graphics card. I will change that down to 0.5, and you can see how this implementation of the Pyroburst Source is getting into account of this explosion here. We have the new Nano VDB implemented into the PyroSolver with the minimal OpenCL solve, which is getting the calculation right from the graphics card. Timescale, the flame lifespan, and everything else to make your explosion very interesting. In the sourcing we can adjust the source frame range, how long the explosion will last, and we have the cycle length that specifies the length of the single sourcing cycle when minimal OpenCL solve is turned on. So it's pretty high. Let's take that a bit lower to something like 45. And we can see how the explosion here is generated on the GPU. And I also want to introduce to you some very interesting new tool, the Trail tool. The Pyrotrail is a new tool of Houdini 18.5 that makes it possible to create trails which then can be piped into your PyroSolver. We have here the little arrows which indicate the pretty much direction and velocity of our explosion, and we have something like initial size, number of trails. When you want to make a lot of trails, we have line, which is pretty much for very large and plume nuke explosions, and a lot of settings here: line length, trail generation, the velocity scale, how far and how fast everything is. And we change here the trail source, the output, and then you can see how Houdini is generating here the points. And to make our trail path work with the PyroSolver, we go to the trail components and make the attribute burn, and also create here a new attribute like temperature, and pipe this in the volume rasterize node to make the volume generated and then created by the PyroSolver. And when we now solve everything, you can see nothing has happened, and this is what the magic is. You sometimes work hours and hours and nothing is working, which is sometimes awesome. Because I made some little mistake, we don't want temperature, we just want to take the burn into the account and create the burn attribute. And you can see how this little fire tornado firework is spreading out into the scene here. I'm gonna add some skylight to the scene, make the adjustments like so, and change the background, which is already dark. And the cool thing here in Houdini is that you can, with the new PyroSolver, also adjust your grid size to something more higher when you have high-res large explosions. So this is making the grid a bit bigger here. And this looks still very crappy, but it's just a short overview to give you some idea how you can play around with the values to make this new feature very interesting. So for the karma rendering, I go into my PyroSolver node, put down a null here, make it out, and assign a material now with the Pyro post-process node, which is also new and gives you great possibilities to control the look of your explosion. So here you can see it's actually the material from the old Pyro FX, and we want to make here some adjustments like red and create a matching material with this button, where you can then in the material slot see here how your Pyro shader is created. And this is something we can then pipe later in to our karma rendering. So I create a sub import node. Now we point over to our out of our Pyro, and you can see how this is here generated inside. I want now a camera where I don't see anything because I'm lost in space and time. So here you can see our element. Pretty low res, but it just should give you an idea. So to take advantage of our Pyro shader, we go into the material and copy this material out into our karma tree with the material library here. So let's copy that in.